I still remember that morning vividly. I had just closed a major deal in Seoul and returned to the States 2 days earlier, exhausted but wired with ambition. That morning, I decided to take a walk through Westdale Market, a place I used to roam back when I had nothing but a backpack full of business ideas and a pocketful of desperation. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day most people forget by lunch. But not me. As I sipped my black coffee and leaned against my matte black SUV, I noticed two kids, twins, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing at the corner near a dusty flower stall. They weren't holding out flowers.
No.
They were clutching a small red toy car. The wheels were chipped and the paint had faded, but their eyes shone with something far more powerful than desperation. Hope. One of them, the boy, skinny frame, crooked glasses, approached a man and quietly said, "Excuse me, sir, would you like to buy our car? It's really fast." His sister stood behind him, eyes wide, like she was bracing for rejection. The man brushed them off. Then another. And another. I couldn't look away. I walked over. "What's the story with this car?" I asked. They looked up, surprised anyone had stopped. The boy squared his shoulders. "We're trying to raise money. Our mom, she's sick. She needs medicine. We don't have much, but this car is special. It's from our dad. He left a long time ago. But Mom always said he picked it just for us." I glanced at the girl. She was holding a note, barely legible handwriting on a crumpled piece of notebook paper. A list of prescriptions, dosages, and a clinic address scrawled at the bottom. Something in my chest cracked open. You see, I wasn't always a millionaire. Hell, there were nights I slept behind restaurants, pretending I had meetings the next day just so I didn't feel like a total failure. There was a time I had to choose between eating or buying Wi-Fi to pitch investors on ideas I wasn't even sure would fly. But that morning, as I stood there in my tailored blazer, success clinging to me like a second skin, I realized these kids were facing a decision I knew all too well. What are you willing to give up for someone you love? I asked for their names. "Lucas," the boy said. "Leah," whispered the girl. I handed Lucas the toy car back. "I don't want to buy this," I said. "But I do want to know more. Where's your mom?" Leah hesitated, but Lucas took my hand and led me down the block to a worn-down apartment complex. 4th floor. Room 406. What I saw there shook me. Their mother, Eliana, was lying on a thin mattress on the floor, barely conscious, her lips cracked, eyes glazed. A neighbor had left her a bowl of broth, untouched. The room smelled faintly of bleach and something I couldn't place, fear. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Hi," I said softly. "My name's Marcus. I met your kids. They're amazing." She tried to smile. "They shouldn't be out alone," she murmured. But I couldn't. I didn't. I looked around. There were no family photos, no framed memories. Just 2 backpacks, 3 spoons, and a calendar with all the doctor visits circled in red. Some of them were dated weeks ago. That moment? It shattered everything I thought I knew about purpose. Backstory. People know me today as the CEO of Gravitas Tech. We specialize in clean energy systems for small towns and disaster zones. We've installed solar grids across 4 continents and just signed a deal with the UN. But rewind 15 years, and I was mopping floors at an airport hangar during night shifts while coding pitch decks during the day. My first investor bailed 2 days before launch. My mom passed away while I was building my first prototype. And the first company I founded? Bankrupt within 9 months. People only see the private jet now. They never saw the nights I stared at a ceiling with an empty fridge and one single conviction: I will not give up. That's why I couldn't walk away from those twins. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew this. They would never have to sell a toy car again just to try and save their mom. As I left that apartment that day, I promised them I'd return. And I did. Not with pity, with a plan. And that plan would change their lives, and mine forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my penthouse overlooking the skyline, surrounded by luxury, but haunted by the faces of Lucas and Leah. I kept seeing their hands, small and callous from helping too early in life. I heard their voices in my head, polite but cracked with worry. And I remembered that crumpled list of prescriptions. I've closed billion-dollar deals with government agencies, negotiated mergers on yachts in Monaco. But this was different. This was real and deeply personal. The next morning, I called my assistant, Paige. "Clear my schedule," I said. "Today, we're not talking profits. We're talking purpose."
She didn't ask why.
She'd seen this look in my eyes only once before, when I launched our foundation after surviving a car crash that nearly took my leg. I went back to apartment 406, this time with the doctor. Eliana was worse. Her fever had climbed, and her breathing was shallow. The doctor looked grim, but acted fast. Within 30 minutes, she was in an ambulance on her way to a private clinic I personally fund. Lucas squeezed my hand on the ride there. Leah clutched her red toy car like it was the last piece of her past. "Will Mom be okay?"
Lucas asked.
I looked him dead in the eyes. "I'll do everything I can. You have my word." Behind the scenes, while Eliana was admitted and stabilized, I made some calls. I had built Gravitas Tech on grit, risk, and an obsession with solving problems that no one else dared to face. This wasn't technology. This was humanity. And I was ready to redirect every resource I had. By noon, I'd arranged for a pediatric therapist to visit the twins weekly, a full scholarship to the best private school in the district, a housing upgrade to one of our rent-free units for under-resourced families, a nurse to care for Eliana at home after discharge. But still, something felt incomplete. Later that week, I brought Lucas and Leah to my office. I wanted them to see where choices, real, hard, relentless choices, could lead. They stood in awe, eyes darting from the glass panels to the framed quote behind my desk. "Build something that outlives you. You built this." Leah asked softly. I nodded. Not in a day. Not alone.
But yes.
This started with one idea in a notebook I couldn't afford to replace. Lucas walked up to my desk and looked at a photo of my mother. "Is that your mom?" "Yeah," I said. "She was a waitress. Raised me alone. She never got to see this part of my life, but she saw something in me when no one else did." They were quiet for a moment. Then Leah said, "That's how Mom is. She says we're her future." That hit me hard. The awakening. That week, I held a company-wide meeting. I rarely do that unless we're launching something big. But this time, it wasn't about business strategy or quarterly reports. I showed them a picture of Lucas and Leah with their toy car. "This," I said, "is the future of our mission. If we can build tech to power the world, we can build systems to protect its most vulnerable." I launched a new initiative, Project Red Car, named after the toy the twins tried to sell. Its purpose? To fund emergency medical support, education, and housing for children in crisis, starting in our own neighborhoods. Some executives pushed back. "What's the ROI?" one asked. I replied, "The return is seeing a kid smile without fear. The return is being the person you once needed. If you don't understand that, you're in the wrong boardroom." We opened the program with 10 families. I funded it personally. And in that same week, Eliana woke up, stabilized, and cried tears that needed no translation. The turning point. The day Eliana returned home, I was there with the keys to a clean, sunlit apartment near a park. The twins ran from room to room like they'd won the lottery. Eliana looked at me with disbelief. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." I crouched beside her, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Because someone helped me when they didn't have to. And because your kids reminded me who I used to be." She wept. I didn't see her as a charity case. I saw her as a mother who did everything she could, who fought even when the world gave her nothing. And that day, as we sat on the floor of their new home, sharing simple rice bowls and laughter, I knew I had just made the most important investment of my life. A few months passed. The season shifted. But something deeper changed. Within the twins, within Eliana, and if I'm honest, within me. Lucas had taken a liking to robotics. I visited their new apartment one Saturday to find him taking apart an old microwave I'd had delivered just weeks prior. "I'm gonna build something that helps people eat faster," he told me, "so moms don't have to be tired all the time." Leah, on the other hand, had begun sketching dresses with torn paper and crayons. "For ladies who don't have fancy stuff," she said with a shrug. "But they still want to look like queens." I didn't tell her then, but I had already reached out to a friend, an ex-fashion designer turned mentor, who agreed to coach her remotely. And for Lucas, I arranged a summer robotics program at a nearby tech institute. Every detail mattered, because their dreams mattered. Breaking the cycle. Eliana insisted on working again once her health improved. I admired her pride. She didn't want to live off anyone's kindness. So, we made a deal. She'd help run Project Red Car's family outreach program, coordinating with new parents in need, turning her pain into purpose. Her empathy was magnetic. Her story, powerful. One evening, after a long day at our outreach center, she sat across from me at a folding table with coffee-stained paperwork and said, "I used to think I was invisible, but now people see me." That line? It stuck with me. Because that's what most people truly want, not fame or fortune. Just to be seen. Heard. Understood. Flashback. My own rock bottom. Years earlier, I sat on the edge of a motel bed, rejected from yet another investor pitch. I was down to my last $74. No safety net. No backup plan. My startup idea, clean energy storage for unstable grids, was called too ambitious, too niche, or worse, unrealistic. But that night, I scribbled 5 words on a napkin. Solve for the impossible first. Those 5 words became my creed. I'd knock on doors at 5 a.m. just to catch engineers before shifts. I'd teach myself chemistry over YouTube tutorials. I once lived off canned beans and vending machine coffee for 2 weeks straight. But I never quit. Not because I was fearless, but because I was tired of fearing failure more than I desired change. And now, years later, I could see that same light, the same stubborn fire, in Lucas and Leah. That refusal to be beaten by circumstance. The moment the world noticed. In December, a journalist from a major outlet visited our headquarters to write a feature on Project Red Car. While interviewing Eliana and the twins, something happened. Leah handed her a drawing, 3 stick figures, holding hands in front of a bright red toy car, beneath a caption written in wobbly handwriting. "We didn't need money. We needed hope." That image went viral within 24 hours. Donations poured in. Celebrities reposted. But most importantly, thousands of messages came in from strangers saying, "This story reminded me to believe again. I grew up just like Lucas. I wish someone had helped me back then. Thank you for showing us the power of doing something." And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a good deed. This was a movement, planting future empires. One evening, I brought Lucas and Leah to a local tech and design fair. Not as guests, but as presenters. Lucas stood next to a prototype made of spare motors and batteries, explaining how it could detect food temperature for elderly people with limited mobility. Leah had crafted a small portfolio of adaptive clothing ideas for children with sensory challenges. Their audience? CEOs. Inventors. Media. And yet, they weren't nervous. They were in their element, because no one had told them they couldn't. After the event, a top innovation mentor pulled me aside. "These kids, they don't just dream big. They dream responsibly. That's rare." I smiled. They've had a crash course in survival. Now they're learning to thrive. The real bottom line. Here's something people rarely admit about success. You can fill every square foot of a mansion and still feel empty. You can buy a luxury car and still drive with tears in your eyes. But the moment you invest in someone else's potential, you feel wealth in its purest form. Not the kind that sits in a bank account, but the kind that echoes in legacies, in lives transformed, in kids who now dream without limitation. I've been called a billionaire, a mogul, a genius even. But the title I value most? The man who bought a toy car with no price tag and discovered it was the most valuable thing he'd ever owned. It's been 3 years since I first saw those twins standing on the street corner, holding out that red toy car. 3 years since their quiet courage cracked open something buried deep inside me, a part of my soul I hadn't listened to in decades. Not since I became CEO. Not since Forbes headlines, fast cars, and glass towers began to define my world. But life has a way of reminding you what matters. And sometimes, that reminder comes in the form of 2 kids with nothing but heart. The graduation that changed everything. Lucas and Leah graduated from middle school last week, first and second in their class. Lucas was chosen to give the valedictory speech. I sat in the front row, beside Eliana, who now leads a full division of our outreach foundation. She wore a tailored blazer Leah had designed. Lucas stepped up to the microphone, holding a folded sheet of paper with slightly trembling hands. But when he spoke, his voice cut through the air like a lightning bolt. 3 years ago, I tried to sell a toy car to help my mom. We didn't want to beg, we wanted to help. That day, a man saw us, not as charity cases, but as people with potential. He believed in us when we were invisible. And today, I stand here because someone gave us a chance. One chance changed everything. The entire auditorium rose in applause. But I didn't clap. I just sat there, quietly wiping away a tear. Because I knew this was never about saving them. It was about empowering them to save themselves. A new generation of builders. Project Red Car expanded beyond anything I imagined. What started with one family turned into a national program that's now helped over 50,000 children and parents. We've partnered with hospitals, schools, shelters. The model? Simple.
See them. Support them.
Set them free. And here's the kicker. We don't just give. We invest in potential, just like venture capital. Only this time, the currency is belief. One of our Red Car alumni now runs a solar startup in Kenya. Another became a teacher and returns every summer to mentor the next group. And Leah? She just signed a junior design deal with a global kids fashion brand at 15. When she showed me the first collection, she said, "It's for girls like Mom. Strong, simple, brave." Full circle moments. I still keep the red toy car in my office, right next to the photo of my mother. It's faded now, a little scratched, but priceless beyond words. Some visitors mistake it for a decorative piece. They don't understand. But I don't explain anymore.
Because those who know, know.
One morning, Lucas visited me before heading off to an engineering boot camp. He stood at the window overlooking the skyline I once chased so desperately. "You really built all of this?" he asked again, just like he did 3 years ago. "Brick by brick," I said. Then he asked, "Do you think I could do something like this too?" I looked at him, not as a boy, but as a future leader, and replied, "Lucas, I think you're going to build something even bigger. Because you've already done the hardest part. You turned pain into purpose." The wealth that matters. People still ask me for the secret to becoming a billionaire. They expect tactics, strategy, something about market timing or AI. But here's my real answer. Solve a problem no one else will touch. Stay in the fight longer than it makes sense. And when you finally make it, use what you've earned to lift those still climbing. I built Gravitas Tech to power the world. But I built Project Red Car to protect its heart. Money comes and goes. Status fades. But kindness, the kind that expects nothing back, that changes bloodlines. Final words. I never expected a child's toy to become the spark for a movement. But life is funny that way. It hands you the extraordinary in moments that look ordinary. That red car? It wasn't just a toy.
It was a signal flare.
A quiet scream for help wrapped in innocence. And I thank God I was listening. So here's what I'll leave you with. When you see someone struggling, don't just walk past. Because that moment, one small choice, could alter everything. Not just for them, but for you. Their lives were never the same. And, because of them, neither was mine.